Join me tonight on Twitch and YouTube at 9 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes. Test your football knowledge for a chance to win money. Completely free to play. Link to join below. And now, on with our feature presentation. I want to give you this insane scenario. On Saturday, the Jacksonville Jaguars will be playing the Tennessee Titans in a winner-take-all game for the AFC South title. Everyone at this point knows the stakes and knows what's on the line. And it's no secret that one of the reasons why the Jaguars are even in this position in the first place is because of the great play of the man you've been watching this whole time, Trevor Lawrence. Now the two teams battle it out on the field for divisional supremacy, and at halftime, the Jaguars are leading by 7 points in a relatively low-scoring game. They're 30 minutes away from a shocking division title that no one saw coming. And Trevor's playing alright. He hasn't turned it over, he hasn't thrown a pick, he threw a touchdown pass, and while it's not his best game by any means, it's a solid outing on paper from the star quarterback. And then, the second half happens, and head coach Doug Peterson decides to bench him for CJ Beathard. Trevor did not say anything in the locker room at the half, did not get into any fight, did not get injured, nothing. Peterson just decides to bench his star quarterback that got him to this point because he felt like it, and wanted to see what the offense had with Beathard under center. If that happens on Saturday night, where Peterson pulls Lawrence in a game where he's playing decently and the team is winning, I can predict that a few things will happen. Number one, I'd probably be in a holding cell somewhere in Jacksonville for the things I'd be yelling. Number two, Doug Peterson becomes public enemy number one, and gets blasted on social media, and gets widely criticized by the press for making the stupidest coaching decision of all time. If you thought the reaction and criticism that guys like Wade Phillips and Marty Schottenheimer got when they controversially benched their quarterbacks in a winner-go-home game was bad, then oh boy, that would be amped up by a magnitude of 100. Number three, Trevor Lawrence would request a trade out of Jacksonville immediately, and no one would blame him. Bottom line, no coach would be dumb enough and stupid enough in a de facto playoff game to pull their starting quarterback with the lead while the starting quarterback is playing well. That is, everyone except this man right here. This is New York Giants head coach Allie Sherman. He's an old friend of the channel, as I did a video about the disastrous end to his coaching stint toward the end of the 1960s with the Giants, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But in 1961, the situation for the Giants entering the final week of the season was simple. Avoid losing your last game, and you win the Eastern Conference and get to play in the NFL Championship. And with his team leading, and his star quarterback playing alright, he decided, screw it. Now seems like a great time to make a switch under center. And the end result? Well, it's complicated. Because more than 60 years later, this is the story behind the absolutely stupid ending to the 1961 NFL season. Before I talk about the decision made by Coach Sherman and just how bad it was, we need some context to understand how the Giants even got to this point, what this game meant to the team, and how the game was going before Sherman just decided to shock everyone. The year is 1961, and with head coach Jim Lee Howell retiring after the 1960 season, following 7 seasons with the team, 7 winning records, 3 NFL championship appearances, and an NFL championship victory in 1956 over the Chicago Bears, the Giants decided to promote their offensive coordinator, Allie Sherman, to the head coaching vacancy. He had some giant shoes to fill, pun completely intended, since over the last 30 years, the Giants had just 2 head coaches, and both of them, Steve Owen and Jim Lee Howell, were highly successful, won a championship, and were incredible at what they did. And at least to start off his career, everything was going swimmingly. Some guys flounder when getting promoted from an assistant coaching position to a head coaching position, but Sherman was not one of them, as his Giants were one of the best teams in the NFL under his watch. Through the first 13 games of the season, the Giants were red hot, sitting pretty with a 10-3 record, and having won 4 of their last 5 and 10 of their last 12. They had a dominant defense that allowed just 213 points, or 16.3 points per game, which was the second best total in football, only 7 points behind the Green Bay Packers. And they had a dominant offense that scored 361 points, averaging 27.8 points per game, which was also the second best total in football, only 6 points behind the Green Bay Packers. And especially at home, when they were playing at Yankee Stadium, they were one of the toughest teams to face. In their last 3 games prior to the regular season finale, they not only went 3-0, but they outscored their opponents 133-42 in that stretch, including a 53-0 shutout victory against Washington. For some perspective, in their last 3 home games, they outscored their opponents by an average of 30 points, or 5 possessions back in 1961, since the 2-point conversion did not exist back then in the NFL. The Giants were an absolutely dominant team. And while there were many reasons for the domination of the Giants in 1961, one of them was the play of their star quarterback, Y.A. Tittle, the 35-year-old quarterback who was in his first season with the Giants after spending the previous 10 seasons in San Francisco and making 4 Pro Bowls. And in 1961, at the time, you could have made the legitimate argument that Tittle, in his 14th season in professional football, had his best year ever. Not only did he make the Pro Bowl, but he threw 16 touchdowns in his first 13 games, which was 4th in the NFL at the time, only behind Sonny Jurgensen, Billy Wade, and Milt Plum. He completed 57.5% of his passes, which might not sound great today, but back in 1961 was incredible, as he was the 3rd most accurate passer in football behind Milt Plum and Bart Starr. And he was extremely smart with the football. Over his final 5 games before the regular season finale, he had 7 touchdown passes and just 1 interception. Tittle was playing at a high level, and now it was time to see if he could seal the deal and play in his first ever NFL championship. And with that, we head to Yankee Stadium for the regular season finale. It's December 17th, 1961, and the situation is simple. Entering the day, the Giants were 10-3, while the Philadelphia Eagles were 1 game back at 9-4. Now, under today's rules, the Giants would have clinched the conference by this point, seeing as the Giants swept the season series between the two teams, winning the first game 38-21, and winning the second game, which took place the week before, 28-24. However, there was no system for tiebreakers back in 1961, and if you want to learn more about some of the bizarre chaos that this created, click the card in the upper right corner. This meant that the Giants still had work to do. However, their fate was in their own hands. Because they led by a game, if they won or tied, or the Philadelphia Eagles lost, then they would win the conference and would get to play the Green Bay Packers in the 1961 NFL Championship. If the Eagles won and the Giants lost, then a 1-game playoff would be held between those two teams to determine the Eastern champion. The Eagles won their game against the Lions by a final score of 27-24, so they weren't getting any help there. And this meant that all eyes were focused on New York. If they could top the 8-5 Browns, then they would be going to the championship. And at halftime, on a cold, 20-degree day at Yankee Stadium, with wind chill taken into account, things were looking alright for the Giants. No, they didn't have the game wrapped up or have a comfortable lead by any means, but they were leading it by a score of 7-0, with the defense playing really well. And Tittle was having a pretty solid game, as even if the scoreboard didn't indicate it, he was not really at fault for this somewhat lackluster offensive performance. You're watching some of the highlights of what Tittle was able to do throughout the first half, as he finished the half going 10 for 19 with 116 passing yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, and a passer rating of 88.9. Obviously, circumstances change in the second half, when you want to control the clock and might not be throwing as much. But if we extrapolate those numbers and double them to show what he was on pace for, we get a quarterback that was on pace for 20 completions and 232 yards. For some perspective, here's a look at every game that Tittle played in 1961. His numbers in this game from a yardage perspective were right on pace with a lot of other games that he played that season, as he was on pace for his 5th highest total across the 13 games. Now, let's look at this from a completions angle, and he was on pace for his second highest total there, with the only performance better being his 24 completion outing in Week 3 during a 24-21 victory over Washington. He didn't turn the ball over, he threw a touchdown, and he played at the level that he was usually playing at, which is how the Giants got to this point in the first place. So how would he come out and play in the second half? Roll the tape. Editor? You want to show the tape there, buddy? You okay? Why are we still on a black screen? Why am I not seeing any footage Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Wait, really? They did? But why? Okay, I'll tell him. So, as it turns out, there's a reason why you're not seeing any footage of Tittle in the second half of this game, and why all of these clips are from the first half. And that's because, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, Y.A. Tittle got benched. That's right, head coach Allie Sherman benched his Pro Bowl quarterback with the lead and with his quarterback playing well, and decided to put in the backup, Charlie Connerly, a 40-year-old who, while he had some good moments in the NFL throughout the 1950s, was abysmal in 1961, completing 41% of his passes, and being 2 weeks removed from an appearance against the Green Bay Packers where he went 1 for 6 with -2 yards passing, meaning that even if you were not born yet, so long as your name is not Charlie Connerly, you had more passing yards on that day in 1961 than he did. You're benching Y.A. Tittle in the biggest game of the season for a bad 40-year-old quarterback who is a complete shell of his former self? Surely there has to be a reason for this. And after the game, head coach Allie Sherman offered up quite the explanation. As Sherman said, "We were running Alex Webster a little too much, and I wanted Y.A. to sit down and see what Charlie was doing. I felt we were putting the ball up passing too much in the first half, and we didn't want to do that." I'm sorry, what? Seriously, what the heck kind of an explanation is that? Number one, there's definitely some value in having a quarterback learn by sitting on the bench for a veteran. But when we're talking about that, we're talking about a rookie. Watch the game from the sideline and see what he's doing and how he commands and runs the offense. You know, stuff like that. You don't say that about a 35-year-old quarterback who's made 5 Pro Bowls, including one this year. That's like having the best professor in your college being reassigned to a teaching assistant, under the logic that he should learn and see what the other professor was doing, even though A, he didn't need to, seeing as he had been working for a while and was great, and B, the other professor was significantly worse. Number 2, you benched Tittle because you thought you were running Alex Webster too much. But then, you say that you didn't like how many times you threw the ball in the first half? How does that make any sense? There are only 2 things you can do if you're a quarterback and you're calling a play. You can either run the ball, or you can pass the ball. So you're upset that you're throwing too much, but you're also upset that you're running too much? This is literally the focus group scene from The Simpsons with what to do about Itchy and Scratchy.
Okay, how many of you kids would like Itchy and Scratchy to deal with real-life problems like the ones you face every day? And who would like to see them do just the opposite, getting into far-out situations involving robots and magic powers? So you want a realistic, down-to-earth show that's completely off the wall and swarming with magic robots.
And number 3, if you're upset about Tittle calling too many passing plays, you know there's a solution, right? Just tell Tittle to stop calling passing plays. It's not a hard concept. Just tell your quarterback to dial it back a bit. Then again, Coach was upset that they were running the ball too much, so I don't even know what Sherman wanted here in the first place. But regardless, with the spot in the NFL championship on the line, he was benching his starting quarterback, who was playing perfectly fine football and had the lead, to put in a significantly worse backup so he could run a game plan that I had no idea what it even was. Which raises the question, did this absolutely stupid idea work? Well, yes and no, if you even want to call it that. The bad news was that, shocker, Charlie Connerly was absolutely terrible. Who would have thought? No, really, who would have thought that putting in an ineffective 40-year-old back there at quarterback would backfire? Connerly finished the game going 4 for 9, throwing no touchdowns, 1 interception, and posting a passer rating of 20.8, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. It was also 4.5 times worse than the passer rating that Tittle had in the first half. And the Giants offense scored a grand total of 0 points in the second half, as they were completely unable to move the ball after benching the main reason why they were able to move the ball. The good news, however, is that Sherman's idiotic decision got bailed out by the fact that the Giants defense only allowed 7 points, so the game ended in a 7-7 tie, which was really a 7-7 victory, because it meant that the Giants were the Eastern Conference champions. This is like when, after taking the 22-17 lead in the Music City Miracle, Titans head coach Jeff Fisher opted to kick the extra point for some reason instead of going for 2. It was an absolutely idiotic decision where I have no idea what he was thinking, but it meant absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. Today, more than 60 years later, this decision has been lost throughout NFL history, and it's not hard to see why. Footage is tough, which makes things easier to forget. The decision meant nothing, as it didn't impact New York's fate in that game, and while Connerly was terrible, he didn't cost the Giants the game through his poor play. But even though it didn't matter, considering the circumstances, this has to be one of the dumbest coaching moves of all time, one of the worst quarterback switches ever, and one of the stupidest ways to end the season. Because in 1961, the New York Giants, thanks to head coach Allie Sherman, almost made a giant mistake. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.